Mr. Forrest Breifogel. A lot of material is planned for this 1-hour webinar, so the audio will be muted for the remainder of the presentation to ensure that we are able to get through the entire presentation in the time allowed. We will not be able to hear you, but you will be able to hear Forrest. So do not let this stop you from sending us a text question through the system during the presentation. We value your questions. If Forrest cannot answer your question either during or at the end of the webinar, we will either email you or call you with a response. There will also be a recording of the webinar available on our website, www.smartersolutions.com, within 48 hours. You will receive an email with a link to the recording. Please know that as a participant in this webinar, someone with Smarter Solutions will be giving you a call or reaching out to you via email. If you don't want us to contact you, please let us know within the feedback survey at the end of the webinar. I will now introduce our presenter, Forrest Breifogel. Forrest is a professional engineer and ASQ fellow. He has authored or co-authored 14 books and published over 150 technical articles. He recently completed a new book, the BPM Guidebook, which is available on our website. Forrest was named the Quality Professional of the Year for 2011 by Quality Magazine. He also received the prestigious Crosby Medal from the American Society for Quality, ASQ, in 2004 for an earlier book, Implementing Six Sigma, 2nd edition. Forrest is currently located here in Austin, Texas, where he founded Smarter Solutions in 1992. Hi, Forrest. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Lon. Well, it's good to be here, and I'm going to have an exciting session. I hope you enjoy it. What do you think about that Dogbird cartoon? Can you relate to it? I think many of us can. Also, as a footnote, we did pay for the royalties to use this cartoon in our presentation. But what are we going to be covering today? Well, first let me talk about risk management. How does that relate to scorecards? Well, if we have good metrics, then we have a good way of mitigating risk. We'll talk about that. Next thing we'll talk about is characteristics of a good metric. A lot of times we'll throw metrics out there, but are they really the best and follow the best characteristics? We'll talk about that. Then I'll be relating some of the common ways we put scorecards together and how well they line up to the characteristics of a good metric. The next thing I'll get into is a predictive way of reporting a lot of these metrics that we traditionally look as static, and how we can go in and maybe predict the future. Wouldn't you rather drive your car looking out the windshield as opposed to just driving the car looking at the rearview mirror? Well, predictive scorecards allow you to do that. And then we talk about putting it all together. You can have great metrics, but that's not necessarily mean you're going to have great success in your organization. How do you pull it all together so that we integrate what we do and how we measure what we do and actually make improvements that's going to help the big picture? Basically put it all together. Okay, got a polling question right away here. How effective are your organizational performance metrics in leading to the most appropriate behaviors? Is it very effective, effective, so-so, ineffective, or very ineffective? So look forward to getting your thoughts on this and see where we're at. We're somewhat baselining the process that you have for doing metrics, or at least that's what we're trying to do.
And the results are coming in for us. We've got attendees here from Florida, all over the United States, other countries here, and they're putting in their input. We'll close the poll within a couple of seconds here. We've got most people voting, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and launch that.
Okay, so we've got, it looks like 50% is so-so. Okay, that's kind of believable. And 20% say they're effective. At the extremes, it's 2% and 15%. Okay, well, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that. So let's talk about risk mitigation. we need to go in and address risk. And we need to have metrics that's going to lead to the right kind of behaviors. Now, what kind of risk can we have? Well, we can have risks from our products or service that we provide. Maybe we're not delivering it on time, or the quality is not as good as we'd like, or you might even have a design problem. And the design problem can relate to transactional process as well. Another kind of risk that you might have is making inappropriate decisions. You believe that metrics, the way they're reported, can drive the wrong kind of behaviors? Well, I've seen that happen in the past, and I imagine you have too. It could be at the executive level, might be at the operational level, could be at the quality level. So it could be very levels throughout the overall organization. So what we really like to do is have metrics that mitigate these risks. Now, in order to do that, what I'm suggesting is that we need to have good characteristics in these metrics. And we also like to include predictability as an aspect of these metrics. Now, have you ever seen information presented like this? Well, I'm sure you have. A table of numbers. Now, if somebody's presenting this as a slide in a PowerPoint deck, what might you hear? Well, someone might talk to the third line in particular saying, well, in 2002, we expect annexations to occur, but they did not occur as quickly as expected. Therefore, our cost per call was up. But in 2003, annexations start occurring, so our cost per call is down. Now, that may be perfectly valid, but is it really instrumental in helping us figure out what we ought to be doing about it? Useful scorecards is a combination of good metric characteristics. We want to have that's really important aspect of this. Now, what are the characteristics? Well, it's important to have business alignment. Just having a metric out there for the sake of a metric doesn't really mean that is very good. We want to really focus on alignment to the business. Also, we want to have an honest assessment. Metrics are not there to make people look good. It's really to expose the issues that we might have so we can take action or non-action. So we want to have truthful, honest metrics. Also, we want to be consistent. Have you ever seen an organization report a metric in a particular form? They say, well, gee whiz, that's not making us look too good. Let's change how we view the metric. So we want to have a consistent approach to actually putting together the metrics, and we want to have the right metric for a given function. Also, we want to look at repeatability and reproducibility. Now, if you've got a given situation, whether it's manufacturing or transactional, and you would go back in time and you looked at it again, would you get the same answer? What about if somebody else took the same situation? Would they get the same answer? That's what repeatability, reproducibility is. You would like for that to occur. Also, you want to have actionability. A lot of times we have metrics out there that are not actionable. Well, that's not necessarily good. It takes a lot of resources often to put together these metrics. So we want to have them actionable or non-actionable, saying, hey, it's okay. Because it's difficult to relate to all the metrics that you might have out there. Also, we want to look at how it changes over time. So it's a time series tracking. We want to be able to have baselines and see if things are changing over time and they've got a trend to it, as opposed to just a snapshot. But how many metrics do we have that are just snapshots? As I mentioned earlier, we like to have predictability. We want to drive the car by looking out the windshield. And if we see an obstacle, we're going to turn the steering wheel or apply the brakes. That's an analogy to a process improvement effort or do some sort of an action. And finally, we want to have peer-to-peer comparability. By that I mean if one person's going to look at a process, they're going to go in and determine how we're going to measure it and how we're going to report out those metrics. If somebody else were going in and looking at that same process, what we'd like to do is have them actually report the metrics using the same basic concepts. But often what happens, we'll have one facility look at a situation and measure it and report it one way, and another one look at it which even though it's similar situation, reported completely different. So we like to have some consistency with that. Now I talk about these methodologies, and that's where this is taken from in one of my books in Integrated Enterprise Excellence Volume 2, which is dealing with the overall business system. And what I'm suggesting here is this how we would look at metrics for the organization as a whole. So now, after you selected the metrics for a particular situation, the next question is how are you going to display them? A lot of times that's not really addressed, at least formally. We want to really have the display be consistent with what we say is the characteristics of a good metric. We also want to consider what kind of behavior is this particular metric display going to create or not create. So I'm going to examine several different type of charting methodologies. And then I'll be examining these relative to the characteristics of a good metric. Well, how do pie charts stand up? Well, in my mind, they're not actionable, they're really not time series tracking, and they're not predictable. Some of the other characteristics that you might have that are risks are those that are listed. It may or may not be an honest assessment. One person might look at it a little different than another. And also there may be peer comparability. How are you going to actually break these things down into categories? So pie charts have some issues with basically the categories that we think are necessity or important relative to creating a good metric. Let's look at time series plots right now. Not predictable. Now sometimes we'll take 2 points and draw another line off of it. Now that's really not what you should do. It's got some other issues too relative to actionability and an honest assessment. So fundamentally, it has some issues too relative to the characteristics of a good metric. Let's look at a stacked bar chart. You ever seen these? Boy, Excel really likes these. They can be really pretty, can't they? They can be three-dimensional too. You really jazz it up a little. But again, they're not predictable. You know, it has some other issues relative to honest assessment, actionability, and so on. So fundamentally, it's got some issues when we go in and stack it up against the characteristics of a good metric. Ah, boy, about the red, yellow, green scorecard. Boy, this is a favorite of many. It doesn't have any predictability, and again, it's got some other issues relative to the characteristics. So it's got some problems too. Now the red, yellow, green scorecard can take other forms, like the one I just showed you is what you might report out in an Excel spreadsheet. But there's some fancier ways of doing it too. You got these dials, and they can go moving up and down. Looks real pretty. Real common thing to do. But also what it's doing is comparing only instantaneous performance to a set goal. How you're doing. You're establishing a goal. If you're not meeting your goal, then you say it's red. Get somebody to work on it. That's the idea behind it. Is that the right thing to do? It doesn't really give you any insight to the trends. Hey, you're red now. Get somebody going. Oh, it was red before. Now it's green. Bring out the champagne. You know, but if you have a goal and it's arbitrary, not a specification, it may get ignored. Or you got a lot of these metrics out there. You can't look at them all. And how well are people really looking at these? Because, hey, maybe if I was red now, it might be green later. So why work on it at all? So if we start looking at how metrics are typically done, they're often fiscal year related. They're unrelated to improvement system. We may have the people in the north wing of the building working on the dashboards, the people in the south wing of the building working on improvement efforts, and guess what? They don't talk to each other. Also, we can be making point-to-point comparisons. This happens often. The nightly business report, we compare this quarter to last quarter or previous year. But is that a good way of doing that? Those are point-to-point comparisons. But what we really have is y as a function of x. That is, the output of the process is a function of the inputs, and the process itself. If you don't really like what Y is, you really need to change the inputs of the process or the process itself. But our metrics don't really examine process outputs, at least the ones I just described, from this point of view. So what we'd really like to have is effective metrics is view the enterprise as a system of processes that build upon each other, so it can be a cascading effect to that. And we understand if we don't like the output, we need to change our processes. Or we need to change some of the rules that are associated with those processes. Another thing that's traditionally missing with a lot of scorecarding is the effective variability. Variability is everywhere, and it can really make a difference on our decision-making process if we include it or we don't include it. The other thing we'd like to do is bring the north wing of the building together with the south wing of the building, and so that if we do not have the right kind of output for what we want, then we need to know or understand that we need to make an improvement. So we want to link our metrics with an overall improvement methodology. Now this is an actual red, yellow, green scorecard. Customer of ours gave us permission to use it. Now this is a very popular way of reporting out metrics, so that we look at the last column. Whenever it's red, we get somebody to work on it. If it was red, now it's green, well, we bring out the champagne. But we're going to examine one of the metrics. Particular metric here that we're examining, it's got 33% red and 50% green. Now the question is this special or common cause? Now those are Deming's terms, and they're related to statistical process control charting. Now what I'm going to be using and describing is a little bit higher than that, what I call 30,000 foot level charting. What Deming really described was more to the lower level. In particular, like manufacturing, you might say that all of a sudden we've got an out of control condition. We need to stop the presses and fix the problem. So we want to have quicker feedback. So what I'm going to be talking about here is more about 30,000 foot level charting methodology.
Forrest, that was really insightful how you showed us just kind of the different methods and where each one of them missed. We do have a question that came in, and so I'll let you, before you tell us about the 30,000 foot level, if you want to address this question for the group really quickly, and then I can't wait to hear more about what you've got to say about the 30,000 foot level.
So the question is regarding the measurement system analysis in services. I've seen chi-squared tests being used to validate measurements in some transactional process, the chi-serving observed and expected. It also comes to mind data audits to ensure consistent criteria. What approach have you been seeing most effective in practice, MSA and services? Well, right now, measurement system analysis, which would be kind of related to what I talked about effective measurements, is dealing with the gauge R&R, or repeatability and reproducibility. So the idea is that for those that may or may not be familiar with it, if you go into the doctor's office and you get your blood pressure measured, okay, they write it down, the measurements you had. But what happens if they took the blood pressure on your other arm? Well, you could get a different number. Or what if you were a little excited when you went in? You know, you could get a different numbers. So that's dealing with the repeatability that you have for those measurements. So that's the kind of thing this question is involving. Now, when I'm first starting out, I'm not too concerned when, you know, relative to, well, I'm concerned, but I don't address it right up front. Sometimes people will go in and spend a lot of time involving their measurement system analysis when they're putting together the metrics. I don't do that, or I don't suggest, because that can be a huge amount of work, because you could have thousands of metrics. If you have to do that for every one of them, it could be a lot of work. So a lot of times what I do is I'll take what I got, and then if I don't like what the answer is, then one of the things I look at far as actually improving it, then I'm going to go in and looking at is there some measurement analysis problems. Like there may be different consistency between people when they're looking at it in a transactional process, how they're collecting the data, and so on. Then I will start examining this. So this is not a perfect way of doing it, but that's what I do it, because this is one of the X's basically that could affect the overall variability or the quality of the measurement that you have in the end. So hopefully I answered that question a little bit.
Yeah,
really can. So,
thank you. Thank you for that for us.
Now, getting back to special and common cause variability, I'm going to look at a 30,000-foot level, a high-level view, and let's get to explain it. I'm going to look at the time it takes to commute from home to work. And let's say you're going by automobile. Now, the question, would it take you the same amount of time to the second every day? Well, the answer is obviously no. You know why? Well, I drove faster one day than the other, or maybe I hit more traffic lights one day than the other. So typically it might take us 25 to 35 minutes. So that can be considered common cause variability. Now, if it took us an hour one day, then we can look at the reason for that. Maybe we had a major traffic accident or we had inclement weather. But we have absolutely no right to talk about the ups and downs that we have in the 25 to 35 minutes. It would drive you crazy. But let's just say we want to spend less time commuting. So we would establish a goal of 33 minutes. So if it's more than 33 minutes, we didn't meet our goal, then we talk about it. So it's 34 minutes today, what happened? And if it's 31 the next day, we don't talk about it. Well, I just said that's not what you should do. It's because it's common cause variability. But that's what happens all the time in red, yellow, green scorecards. We set the goal within common cause variability, and it can lead to much firefighting. Now, if we wanted to spend less time commuting, we have to change our process. So let's consider now that we left a half an hour earlier. We examine now how long it takes us to commute, and it's 18 to 22 minutes. So we've reduced not only average time, but also the variability in time for us to commute. Now the point is that if you've got common cause variability in your process and you don't like the answer, you have to change your process or the inputs to the process. Reacting to all the ups and downs as though they're common cause, as though they're special cause variability doesn't do that. To reiterate the point that was made in that question, if we got too much variability, we then might go in and decide, among other things, to look at how we actually measure the time that it took us to actually depart. Are we always going to go in and leave when we start the car? Are we going to go in when we leave, count the time that it takes us to commute when we open the garage door? So if we're not really consistent on that, that can lead to some measurement problems, which was alluded to in the previous question. So we need to have consistency. Or if we go in and compare our time, my time to my wife's time, commuting the same place, we might get a completely different answer because one of us is measuring it differently than the other relative to the start and stop time. So that's part of the measurement analysis piece of it. Okay, so let's go in now and look at this red, yellow, green scorecard in a little bit more details. One of the things that we notice from this, it does not go in and give us any insight to the future. Also, it can lead a lot of firefighting. As I reiterated, we bring out the champagne from red to green, but if it goes back to red again, we get all nervous again. But are we just toggling within common cause variability? We don't know by looking at this chart. So what I'm going to do now is examine this using a 30,000-foot level individuals chart. Now, for those that are familiar with control charting, you say, well, this is just regular control charting. Well, it's not. It's got some up and down variability that we're looking at from a high level. We don't do an X bar and R chart, P chart, U chart, and C chart. There's technical reasons for that. Now, for those that are interested in that, just this month in February of 2014 here, in the Six Sigma Forum magazine, there was an article that just came out that I wrote, 15-page article about 30,000 foot level reporting. Now, I've been talking about this methodology for the last 10 years, but this is a peer-reviewed magazine. So just thought you would be interested in that, and if you're interested, you can let us know, and we'll hook you up with a copy of that. But that'll get into more details of what I'm actually alluding to during today's session. But one thing, when we plot this out, the two horizontal lines, the upper control limit, the UCL, and lower control limit, LCL, is a function of the variability, not what you want. So if you got more variability, they're going to be wider. If you got less, they're going to be narrower. Again, independent of what you want. But you'll notice there's no trends relative to these two horizontal lines. So what do we really conclude from that is that we've got common cause variability to this particular process. So the 1.9 and 2.62 is somewhat similar to what I was describing in our commute from home to work, 25 to 35 minutes. So we're not seeing any trends relative to that. So we say we got a stable process. So right now, we concluded from the red, yellow, green scorecard that we made changes and things got worse. But in this case, when we plot the information in a different way, we get a different opinion about what's happening. Now, this is not saying we don't have a problem, but we could have a common cause problem, not a special cause problem. So if you got a recent region of stability, what can you say? You can say my process is predictable. Now, it could be predictable 3 days, 3 months, or 3 years. So you got to go back in time to go in and to determine how much stability you have for how long. Now, the next obvious question you can have is, what do you predict? So what I'm going to do now is consider the data from the recent region of stability to be a random sample of the future. So we'll build a distribution and turn it on its side. Now, the area under the curve to the left at 2.2, that's our goal that triggered to be red previously. That area represents the percentage of time that we expect it to be red in the future. Now, determining what that area is, it's not trivial, and it also could not be normally distributed. There's some situations, especially transactional processes, are not normally distributed. But that's not a big deal at all if you use a normal probability plot. Now, a normal probability plot for continuous data may initially look rather intimidating, but it's quite simple. You notice that the x-axis has got the same values, but the y-axis has got percent less than. So basically, the y-axis intercept represents the area under that curve for 2.2. And similarly, we could take other values on the x-axis and figure out the percentage of time it's less than those particular values. So what have we concluded so far for this particular set of data? We've concluded that we've got a stable process and we've got about a 32.6% problem. Now the next question is, how do you present this? And what I'm suggesting is we could present this to the all levels of management and operators for that management. And we want to present it so everybody understands what we have. So first you want to describe the stability of the process. So what I'm doing with these two charts, the left chart is looking for stability. That's the only thing it's doing. You might have to stage it to determine what's the latest frequency or the latest time period of stability, or it might not be stable at all. But using the 30,000 foot level reporting in these control charts can change your behavior on what's stable and what's not stable. Then a probability plot is used to describe how it's performing relative to what we're interested in. Now if you notice, this is looking at variability along with how we're reporting the metrics. That's an important thing that Deming points out. Now, I like to report it so it's easy for everybody to understand. So instead of the red, yellow, green scorecard, what I'll be suggesting is reporting how the metric's doing over time, and then make a statement below it that puts it in words that everybody understands. Now, if somebody's putting together these metrics, it doesn't really help them improve the processes that are associated with it. It's just reporting. But sometimes we tend to manage to the whys. George or Mary, meet your numbers. Get your numbers out there. Well, if they got a stable process and the numbers are not satisfactory, they need to change them. But the thing is, when you start looking at an organization as a whole, it can become very difficult to determine where to improve the processes that's going to affect the enterprise as a whole. So what I'm suggesting is we want to go in and look at it as an overall business management system. How we put it all together. And that's what this 9-step business system does. Now, the first step is describe your vision and mission. Now, the second step describes your value chain, which includes your satellite, those are financial metrics, and 30,000-foot level metrics. Now, those would be both reported out in a similar fashion that I just described. Next thing we want to look at is analyze the enterprise. We want to look at our value chain, how the metrics are performing. We want to look at the customer viewpoint of what we're doing. We want to look at the economy and so on. We then want to create in step 4 SMART, specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-based, satellite or financial metric goals. We then want to create strategies that are targeted strategies that are aligned to those financial goals. Then in step number 6, we want to create 30,000-foot level metrics that's going to be that are aligned to those strategies, which again is aligned to the financials. And now the process owner is going to be asking for projects to get done. And that's what's in step 7. See how that's different than traditional Lean Six Sigma, where we'll typically get a list of projects that various people think we ought to be working on, including executives, and then we kind of vote on it. But the problem you can have with that approach is you can get siloed projects. So you report 100 million in savings, but nobody can find the money. Now, if we did a good job on our projects, we improved the value chain procedure, which improved the 30,000-foot level metrics, which improved the satellite or financial metrics. So everything's aligned. Notice also it moves back to step 3. So we somewhat have a plan, do, check, act. I mean, plan, do, check, act, or PDCA for the enterprise as a whole. Next, describe the application of these techniques to the hospital. Okay, if we start looking at a drill down of step number 2, we'll have a value chain for the hospital. So the steps that are connected at the top by the arrows are the primary functions of the hospital. The voice of the customer, sales and marketing, deliver clinical service, invoice, collect, report, financials. IT, housekeeping, food service, patient transportation, or support activities. So now if we drill down on report financials, we could have 2 swim lanes. The top swim lane could be the reporting of the financial or the metrics associated with that. Often I look at quality, cost, and time relative to the metric that or the function that we're looking at. Then I have also the flow chart or the value stream map that's associated with that. Now you notice profit margin and the metrics have that little link there. That means I got a metric associated with it. Now if we're in a room, what we do is make this, we could have this clickable. This is a PowerPoint presentation here, but I could go to the internet and actually click through it, and that's what you really want to have, these metrics that I'm sharing with you, real-time update, and we have software that helps with that. So if we click on profit margins, this is what we get. One thing in a stable region, you don't want to have people asking why is one metric low, why is the number low for one point in time and high for another point in time. If it's a region of stability, common cause variability, and you should not try to describe what's happening for each individual point. Now you can look at things collectively to build hypotheses and test those out in the common cause region of stability, but individual points by themselves could be very deceiving. But in this particular case, it shifted downward. That's not good. So the last 6 points were at a lower level of performance than they had been done previously. If you look at our comments on our software, then someone noticed that we had a reduction of a certain amount at a point in time. Now the next obvious question is, why do we have this reduction? And more importantly, what are we going to do about it? So let's click on Voice of the Customer. Again, we've got our metrics, and we've got our generic flow chart that's associated with that. If we now drill down on customer dissatisfaction, we notice that dissatisfaction got worse. Oh my goodness, what happened? Well, we notice all of a sudden we're getting comments like poor room cleanliness, unfriendly staff, and spent a lot of time waiting. Okay, that's a clue. It's somewhat of a murder mystery. Who done it? We want to go in and start figuring out what is happening here and give us insight to what to do. Let's move on now to sales and marketing. Again, we got our metrics, and now we got the procedures associated with that. If we drill down on market share now, this is what we have relative to the market share. Oh my goodness, market share drop. What happened? Oh, had a competitor move into town. Oh, another clue. Let's go in now and look at deliver clinical services. Again, we've got our metrics, got our procedures. To reiterate, this is Y basically, this is X. See, we brought the north wing of the building together with the south wing of the building, or we really got Y as a function of X, all in one particular place. We can also drill down to go in and have PDF documents, spreadsheets, and so on. Could have websites links or other procedures that were associated with this particular process. So basically, this overall value chain that I'm talking about, this integrated enterprise excellence value chain, can become a repository for what we do and how we measure what we do. Now, this is interesting. In the case of a hospital, you're going to do hospital things. So even if you bought another hospital, it's fundamentally the same thing. So you can use this procedure to, when you acquire companies and putting it all together, it makes life a lot easier when you're doing that. So let's now look at one of the metrics that we have for deliver clinical services. One thing we notice here, it's a stable process. It didn't change. Now the point is this particular metric is probably something that we wouldn't be working on, at least to go in and improve profit margins. Now we might be working on it for another reason, but for a profit margin motivation, we probably wouldn't be working on it. The point, you don't have to go in and work on every process to positively impact the enterprise as a whole. I was just talking to someone the other day about they're doing all these process improvement projects, and it's not affecting the big picture because they're not looking at the bottleneck or the constraint in the organization as a whole. I did a keynote presentation in a major defense contractor, and the general manager was describing how they had been doing lean, how much benefit that they got. So I went out to the facility and looked at it and said, boy, you're doing a good job in lean. However, I noticed you got a lot of idle equipment. What projects are you in sales and marketing? They weren't doing anything in there. That was the bottleneck. You need to go look at the big picture, and that's what we're really trying to do with this. Now, another metric we have for operational produce and deliver products is errors. Boy, this is good news. It dropped. But again, relative to should we be working on this particular metric for us improving profit margin, the answer is probably no. Maybe again we work for a different reason. Let's now look at housekeeping. Again, we've got our metrics and we got our procedures that give you those metrics. Our cleaning quality, we click on that. We notice how it degraded. What happened here? We outsourced there. It's like we didn't have too good procedures. So again, this is a clue. Now, if you remember what we had, from voice of the customer, it said we had some cleanliness issues. Maybe this is something we should work on. Patient transportation, diagnosis to bed. Let's look at that one.
Yeah, Forrest, it's really interesting to look at each one of these. We do have a question that came in kind of related to the screen that we're on currently. He asked, where does the data reside that's linked to the process? Is this an Excel, or are you directly linking to other systems?
Okay, good question. What we have is our software sits on the server with Minitab statistical software. You have also at the workstation level, you have a flow charting program like iGraphics or Visio. And then you publish it to the server. So you basically have your flow charting processes and also, well, you have basically what I'm showing right there on the server. And then what our software does is it goes out on a schedule, perhaps once a day, and it pulls data from your spreadsheets, if that's where you're keeping it, or your ERP systems that you have, SQL databases, wherever. It doesn't really matter. You could have quite a few different types of systems, but as long as the server can have access to that, then the thing is we pull together these charts. And what it does is it basically creates a picture of that graph. So it analyzes the data and then throws it away so you don't have duplicated metrics around there. And then for that day, if that's how often you're updating it, anybody that's got access to a computer and the internet throughout the world and has authority, has the authority to access this particular piece, because it's an HTML document. You don't have to have iGraphics, Visio, Minitab, or anything else because it's created as a picture. And all I'm doing here right now is simulating what you would have if you were actually in relating to clicking through it in a computer environment. Okay? So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So then you come out and you get this metric here, and if we start looking at this one here, now we notice diagnosis to bedtime is here. So it went down. But the problem is we still got a 93% problem. Now, what our software does is it's got a fairly sophisticated macro for putting together these charts, and it's got drop-down menus, so when you create these charts, this is what you do. So this is not just a normal thing that you do in Minitab. So this is part of our software package in addition to going out to pulling it, then you can do this. Now, people can actually, we do have individual license that where somebody doesn't have to go out and automatically collect the data. So you could, if you got Minitab already, you can buy that. So it's like $99 or something. It's pretty reasonable. So if you're interested in that, let us know.
So Forrest, we have another attendee who asks, a lot of what you're showing us thus far has been normally distributed. Does this predictability apply equally in instances of non-normal data?
Very much so. And if you got a continuous response, and let's say you're bounded by 0, then the thing is that chances are it's going to be like a log normal might fit it. Now, I don't like to go in and use transformations of data that don't make physical sense. People that have gone through Six Sigma training may have taken the Box-Cox transformation and just assigned these lambda values that whatever the software says is appropriate is appropriate. I don't like that approach. I want to do something that makes physical sense. So if you've got something that's bounded by 0, and it can't be 0, but it's a little bit more than that, then the thing is like log normal makes physical sense. But the only difference there is that you would use a log normal probability plot. Now maybe this is a good point in time to make this statement here. What I've just done recently, and it just came out yesterday, is I'm going to be looking at a lot of measurements reporting, how people look at traditional scorecards, and then going in and looking at them using a 30,000-foot level approach. So my blog, which just came out yesterday, was my first one on that. So I had permission to take this one report out that involves 6 metrics, and then I report it out using a 30,000-foot level chart. And what I'm going to be doing is planning to do a blog a week where I'm going in and looking at real data, or you could have real situations. I don't want to use any proprietary data, obviously, but I'm going to be using real data, real situations to go in and create these 30,000-foot level charts, and also have in these blogs a comparison to the traditional way of doing it versus the 30,000-foot level approach. And then you can go in and share that with somebody else, or if you have some data like that that you might look at, just email me, and then I'll look at it for you, and then put together your PowerPoint, and then talk to you about making adjustments to it so I could put it as a blog and share the information with other people.
Oh, Forrest, that's really great to hear. I did see your BPM blog yesterday and the new article that you had out with the examples. The blog link, you can find that at smartersolutions.com, but I had another attendee ask for an example in pharmaceuticals. So I don't know, is one of your blogs that you'll be doing over the next couple of weeks, does that involve pharmaceutical data, or could she possibly send that in to you?
Oh, she could send it in to me. That would be fine, because a lot of times I can have a discussion, we can send it in to me, or we can have a discussion what it is, and then I could go in and put it together. Some of these metrics are just really applicable across the board. It's not particularly involved in one industry, but the thing is, sometimes when you take a particular situation that somebody has and actually start talking to them in their language, it makes a lot more sense to them. Because this is not really trivial to set up, at least the first time, and then you start catching on to it, and it can really change your life on how you look at data. So good.
Great.
So, but anyway, this one has some issues relative to the goal of transporting people, and it's going to get arrival of less than 30 minutes. So maybe there's some opportunity there, because if you recall, the voice of the customer had feedback that they had to spend a lot of time waiting. So now I'm moving over to the function called Enterprise Process Management. You notice I got the 9-step business system in there, but I also got an Enterprise Improvement Plan. So if I click on Enterprise Improvement Plan, then I got this particular output. So step 4 is the business goal, step 5, 6, and 7. Okay? So in this particular case, we want to get the financials to go back where it was before we had that downplay in our financials, our profit margins. Now, how are we going to do that? We want to increase the monthly revenue, the top line. Okay, well, how are we going to? What's the approach to do that? With a high potential area. Number 6 is marketing. Now, marketing may have to go out and start marketing to doctors, and they have to start marketing to patients. There could be a lot of different opportunities there. But it's not necessarily going to be very easy. But the key point here is there's a marketing manager that owns that, and he or she is going to be asking for that project to get done. See, that's different than traditional Lean Six Sigma, where now we're looking at how much we save through all these projects. But the process owner is often not asking for it. Where here, I want to have it so that these are important metrics for the business as a whole that need improvement, and those process owners are going to be asking for this project to get done. So the point is, these projects don't fall off people's plate. It gets put back in the middle of it, because that's really important. Because guess what? They're going to have to be reporting to their boss's boss every month, and so they want to do a good job on it and how it is that impact the metrics, and they understand completion of the projects is important for the success of the metric. Now, the other thing on the strategy, improve the customer view, that we have, well, one opportunity is housekeeping. Again, there's a process owner for that, and they're going to be asking for that project to get done. And notice how we got the project set out with a particular goal and a time frame with it. and also patient transportation associated with that. That's another owner's asking for their project to get done. So it's going to be focused now on projects that's going to be tied to the overall enterprise as a whole benefit. Okay, so the next polling question. How effective would your organization performance metrics be in leading the most appropriate behaviors if your metrics were reported using the 30,000 foot level methodology I talked about? Let's see what we got over here.
And it was very, very interesting, for us going from one extreme to the other, showing your, 30,000 foot level format. So it looks like a lot of people are really thinking that that's kind of the way to go when it comes to performance reporting. I'll go ahead and close the poll in a couple of seconds here and show you the results.
Okay, well, it looks pretty good here. Boy, we had 50%, as I recall, so before, and it looks like we've had a lot of movement up to the top. That's great. I agree with the answer on this, obviously, but I'm glad that you see the value of this particular point. Now, one of the comments that I might get is that, well, Forrest, this is great, but the thing is, this is my boss's boss decision, on how they look at the metrics. But is there an approach that you can start out small? Because I've basically described the whole enchilada here. Kind of, I think as Covey said, keep the end in mind. And that's what I basically described to you. But you can start out small. And you can take me up on my offer of taking a key KPIV that's important within your business, and let's look at the data differently. And then I put together, like I did for this other company, a PowerPoint presentation that you might share with an influencer decision maker and saying, gee whiz, we thought we made improvements, but we didn't. So that could be a way of actually showing that, hey, maybe there's a different way of looking at it. And so you could start in one area of the business and kind of grow into it. So let's look at readdressing our learning objectives that we had here. Talked about risk mitigation. So we want to have metrics that are going to reduce our risk of having problems. We talked about the characteristics of good metrics. And I think it's really important to focus on those when we look at the metrics. And when we look at the 30,000 foot level metrics, it really meets all those particular characteristics. We also talked about issues with common scorecarding. And we talked about this predictive metric, the 30,000 foot level. And then the integration of predictive performance measures in an overall business management system. So that's the blog that I was talking about. If you're interested in seeing the application of these techniques, you can just sign in the blog right now and look at the last one I did. And I plan on doing some more along the way. And if you got situations that you'd like to see, I'm more than happy to do this because I think that this could be really beneficial for our organizations, no matter what kind of industry they're in.
Yeah, and so that's the link to the blog. You also mentioned the article that you did for the magazine. We can definitely send that link as well. So you can email Forrest, you can email myself, Yvonne, to get that information. And then looks like you got about 5 minutes for more questions here, Forrest. So any questions you guys have, just feel free to send those in. We had great participation, and we really appreciate you guys joining us on the webinar today. There will be a poll at the end of the webinar when you close out. We've got a couple of questions there. Definitely, if you want to opt out of getting contact back, that will be one of the options. And we also invite you to check out the website so you can see upcoming webinars that we've got. We like to do one every single month and post that to our online resource library, but also just to engage with you guys. Forrest, a couple questions you've got here. How can this tool software be used for process monitoring? Most business processes are weak at best and need to be improved or monitored for disruptive changes. Can it be tied to an existing software tool?
Well, yeah. Right now, the software that we have is it just goes in and, so like I said, sits on the mainframe and goes out and pulls it. Now you can do this manually with our individual license. I said it's like less than $100, and you could go in and take the data, and it's got a menu-driven approach on actually how do you create those charts. And we do also, by the way, have some online 30,000-foot level training, that you might be interested in too. I do cover this in Volume 3 in Chapters 12 and 13 of Integrated Enterprise Excellence. So if you're interested in that, that's one piece of the overall puzzle that we have for putting together the MAG process. So those are some real options you have. So you can actually create it manually, but if that's, when it grows into, you don't want to do that forever. You got a lot of metrics, and then because it can go out and just pull from various places for putting it all together. And then the conversation I was just having a little bit earlier, the suggestion is first you got to kind of get the idea of how to report these metrics out there, and that's what I can kind of help you do. I've gone into a company, major defense contractor, and help them build their value chain metrics. First you have to decide what you want to look at, and then you're going to look at how you're actually going to report it. And so after you help you a little bit, then you're pretty much on your own.
Got it. And Forrest, if you could, I don't know if you're able to go back through your slides, but it would be good to see just again that list. Somebody's asking, they missed one of the lists.
But
what is a
characteristic of a good metric?
What is a characteristic of a good metric? Another attendee joined a little late. We did have a couple of people who joined late as well, and so we will be sending out a link so that you can check out the recording of this webinar, and that should come out within 24 hours from now. So also, again, the article that Forrest wrote that was published this month in the magazine, you can all get a copy of the magazine, but we will also send you a direct link if you request that. So we'll get that out to you. But again, there is the list, the characteristics of a good metric. And Forrest, what if we're unsure of what to do with our current metrics? Is this a good starting place to look at these characteristics and see if our metrics are good?
Yeah, because like business alignment, what I was doing with this integrated enterprise excellence approach, see how I was lining it to the overall business through the value chain. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then an honest assessment, I look at each of the functions relative to quality, cost, and time when I start drilling down to that. And I want to have consistency, so everybody's basically looking at the same way, and you get the teams together. If you got various facilities, hey, which measurements are we actually going to use? And I focus, again, quality, cost, and time. And then we also talk about repeatability, reproducibility, like the original question that we had here. How can we make sure that the start time is always the same? If we're looking at delivery time, when does it actually start? The clock start? When does it actually stop? For dealing with that. Actionability, see, that's another thing about the 30,000-foot level report. You could have a special cause condition. You say, I got to stop what I'm doing. What happened there? Well, maybe you had a major outage because of an electrical storm. Okay, I could talk about that, but not all the ups and downs. And if it's maybe something that's, it's non-actionable, because I was also talking about non-actionable relative to profit margin. And we saw how we did time series tracking and predictability, and also pure comparability. See, if it's an issue, it's a common cause problem. And so we want to look at it that particular way, and that's part of putting together all these metrics, and we can work with you on doing this.
Okay, and GoToWebinar just sent us a note that the audio went out for a couple of seconds while you were talking there for us, but I think we got the gist of most of that, so thank you again. If you have any last questions, feel free to email or call in to Smarter Solutions. And again, a link to this recording of the webinar, Deceptive and Destructive, Beware of Traditional Performance Reporting, will be emailed to you directly. Thanks for joining.